Ever wondered what goes through a champion's mind under the brightest lights? Join me as I sit down with Espen Jørstad to review his 2022 main event victory, diving into each decision alongside GTO Wizard. All right, this is Kevin Rabichow. I've got Espen Jørstad here. Espen, are you excited to review the final table of your main event win?
For sure. I actually haven't watched through the footage yet. I've seen some of the hands, but not all of it. For a long time, I didn't really want to watch this final table because I wanted to make some sort of content out of it. And now we're finally doing it, so I'm excited. Let's go, yeah.
All right, let's get into it. So here you've
First
got,
hand is brutal.
yeah, early position raise from Farnes. No, actually, he's in the hijack. Hijack with pocket fours, but he's opening into your chip lead on the button, two short stacks in the blinds. I see you're calling with pocket tens. How do you see this preflop spot?
Yeah, I remember this hand from in-game. I thought I would not take what felt to me as marginal spots. I would rather try to play smaller pots in position, kind of maneuver. I have actually looked at the sim for this one already, and I was meant to pure 3-bet pocket tens,
Hmm,
and he was not meant to open pocket fours. So the
right.
fact that he opens pocket fours means that I should probably be even more inclined to just 3-bet pocket tens here. I did not think he was going to be this wide, to be fair. Um, he's in the hijack, but as you said, he's opening into two short stacks and two people that cover him. It's kind of a rough ICM spot for him, so I didn't expect him to be that wide.
Yeah. Fair, I think, to not expect pocket tens to be that strong for 30 big blinds. Now, as played, I mean, he came out c-betting on the flop, which I would also say is a little non-standard, betting on a low board into the covering stack.
Yeah, I agree. I would probably just not play many c-bets from his position. He's from the hijack. He's not opening the offsuit 9x, which is going to matter on a 9 high board. He's not going to have like the king 9 offsuit, queen 9 offsuit, jack 9 offsuit, 10 9 offsuit. If he's from the cutoff, he could have those hands, maybe. But from the hijack, he's not going to have those. So especially on a 9 high board, it's a bit rough for him to do a lot of c-betting. Yeah, he goes
Credit,
for a small c-bet on the flop. I call, and then this on the turn.
yeah, this on the turn. I was going to say credit to him for a creative line on the turn. He checks over to you. I kind of like now he's finally slowing down on the turn, recognizing the board. You might stab at this. It looks in your favor, and he kind of catches you with the exact mid-strength hand we don't want to face this aggression, right? Like I imagine from your point of view, you're just hoping to put your 25% in and kind of freeze the action, and that's not what happened.
Exactly, yeah. It feels like a card where we can just make a small bet, get some protection, get some value. Then he hits us with the super small check raise, and then the less than B25 river bet as well. I don't know
Yeah.
how I feel about the action here, calling turn and calling river. I don't know. I felt like the sizings were too small. I just need to be right so rarely, to call this river bet. If he just has like I don't think he ever has worse for value, of course, but if he just bluffs king queen sometimes, or ace eight or whatever, I don't know. He doesn't need that many bluffs for me to be right here. But then again, like, is it realistic that he's gonna have enough bluffs here? Like one of the first hands of the main event final table. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I have to say it's hard for me to imagine getting away either. One of my rules for live poker, especially against someone I don't know well, is there's enough uncertainty happening in these weird spots where it's like I'm just so confused by this hand and I'm getting 5-1 on the river, right? And like 5-1 just might be too good.
Yeah, I like this approach.
All right, second hand here, and it looks like we've got Asher Conniff open jamming pocket tens from the low jack. This is about 15 blinds. What are your first thoughts?
First thoughts is that maybe we don't want to play any jamming range for 15 in the low jack here. It's not gonna be like a disaster, I think. But in general, with ICM, you have to be a bit more careful of shoving these stacks. It's not even for chips, like you're not playing that much of a shoving range, 15 in low jack. Um, I don't know.
Yeah.
Pocket tens, I would probably just go with a raise, and if I face resistance, I'm just in there. Yeah, what do you think?
Yeah, I think, defending it for a second and just out the door on the flop, but defending it for a second, I understand that discomfort where we've got 15 blinds and we look ahead to the button tied for chip lead, big blind chip lead, right? So it feels like, I think for some players, what options do I have when I min raise? Because these players are just going to put me in the bin every hand. I'd rather just be all in and be done with decision making, right?
Yeah, pocket tens is quite a lot of hand though. Like if we wanna like bully him around as chip leaders, just yeah, let us and get it in with pocket tens with a lot of equity. I don't know. Um, it kind of just I don't know. Uh, do you want to have a quick look at the preflop sim here to see how the preflop range looks?
Yeah, let's do it. All right, so here's the preflop solution for Conniff spot in the low jack. And I mean, there is a small fraction of jamming here, but it looks like you had it right, Espen. We just basically don't want to do anything other than min raise.
Yeah. There is jamming, like the usual suspects, like king jack suited, ace jack off, ace queen off. Yeah, I would expect to maybe see a little bit of pairs in here as well, since we are jamming like a little bit of these hands, but you can see like a sliver of pocket sevens. We can have a quick look at pocket tens, I guess, to see the EV difference of min raise and jam. Okay, so the EV difference is actually like quite substantial, I would say. Big enough that
Yeah.
it matters at least.
Yeah, I would agree. And to the idea I brought up before of not really knowing what we're gonna do if we min raise and have to make further decisions. I mean, this is just something that we have to deal with, but maybe let's take a quick look at Duek's spot from the small blind. He just had ace king suited and ended up calling our jam, obviously, but the decisions we're gonna have to deal with are just dealing with small three bets or potentially dealing with jams. I imagine, like you said, we don't have too much to think about with pocket tens, but is there anything kind of challenging that you see here or interesting that might come up if we do go down the min raise tree?
Really, I mean, you see the sim wants to play a little bit of flatting, like queen jack suited, king jack suited, ace ten suited, like some of these hands that play really well post flop. Little bit of aces to protect that range, and a little bit of pocket sevens as well. But in general, I just don't think we're gonna be in too many tough spots by min raising. I just yeah, and also I don't like that logic in general. I don't like the the logic of just let's do this easy option so we don't face a tough decision. I think we should always just look for what is our highest EV option, not what is the easiest play to make, you know?
Yeah, well said. All right, so Espen, you're starting this hand under the gun. Ace 10 offsuit, about 55 blinds. Do you think this is a standard open?
I think it's pretty standard. It's definitely close. Yeah, I would like very have a very easy fold with ace nine, very easy open with ace jack. Ace 10 is the one where I'm not sure, like we're covered by Dobrich and Sue, and we have the same stack as Duek. So it's definitely a lot of ICM pressure here. And yeah, I'm fine with opening ace 10. I don't think we're going to get 3-bet and bullied as much at this table as we would in the sim. So I think it's perfectly fine.
Yeah, I tend to agree, and there's also it's nice that there's no overwhelming chip leader really at this point. Like you're middle of the pack, but there's nobody who's really far ahead.
Good point. If someone has like 3x my stack, they can bully us a lot more than what Dobrich can do here, for example, right? There's a lot of risk premium for him as well, not just us.
Yeah, and you can see that a bit with the way Duek plays this king jack suited, just flatting in the hijack. You got to think that's going to be a pretty strong range, right?
For sure. It's going to be a lot more condensed than our range and pretty strong as well. Um, Wonder if we want to see bet this board at all, actually, three-way here. I think I'm quite happy just playing range check, even though it's two high cards and we open under the gun. Typically a spot where you do play some bets. But what do you think?
Yeah, I think that's a cool idea. I mean, there's some incentive maybe to get Duek to fold like pocket sixes, sevens, eights, these kind of hands on the flop. But overall, I think most hands just play fine as a check, and his range is going to connect quite well when he's unpaired pre-flop with Queen 10x, right? So we expect him to be pretty strong. I think starting with a check and letting him play aggressively is smart.
Yeah.
So he does bet half pot on the flop. You check call. Probably nothing really to decide there. I think once you've checked, it's a mandatory check call and a mandatory turn check.
Great. River is kind of interesting, I think. I don't think there's that much value in going for a block here. I mean, I could see block trying to get called by like pocket fives, sevens, eights, whatever that started betting the flop. But in general, I think a lot of his weaker 10x is gonna just check back the flop. So he's either gonna have like some draw that missed, or a flush now. Yeah, or just a queen, you know. So blocking the river here doesn't seem that attractive to me.
Yeah, I think I agree, and I noticed the larger flop size from him. I tend to expect that to rule out like truly marginal hands from his range, but maybe he could have some random bluff that hit a six, or he could have been bluffing the flop with like pocket fours and then decided to not keep barreling. But you do check, you face a bet from King Jack and go for the check raise. How do you feel about this play in hindsight?
I'm not sure, honestly. It's tempting to just call as well, looking at it now that I can see his hand as well, you know? So, it is a spot where maybe I felt like the 10 of hearts was actually a better bluff than the ace of hearts, thinking that he was gonna barrel a lot with nut flush draws, while he might be more inclined to check back if he had like uh, king 10 with king 10 of hearts, for example. Like if he had a flush draw with the 10 of hearts, you know, like middle pair and flush draw. So
Yeah.
maybe that's my thought here, that I wanna just bluff the 10 of hearts instead because it blocks more flushes that is actually gonna get to the river with. Mm, yeah, I'm not sure. I'm not sure how I feel about this one.
Yeah. And I mean, credit to you for making a pretty difficult check raise bluff. This is over half your stack in a spot where you probably weren't sure in the moment either. On the surface, it feels just like it can't be that bad, right? You've got the 10 of hearts on the river. It is key interaction. You're facing a small bet in a line where he checked behind the turn. So there's a lot of evidence in favor of maybe this is a weak hand and maybe this is a good blocker. So let's just go for it.
Yeah, I mean, I think in game it felt to me like he's gonna have a lot of marginal value doing this, like king queen, queen jack suited, maybe pocket jacks, you know, where he just flats pre, very standard, and then I guess the river like this. I'm not sure. He went for a bet, very small bet as well. I think he bet like 7 into 19, so like B40 or whatever.
Yeah.
So a small bet from him, you know, and I don't know. It's kind of hard for him to have very many natural bluffs here as well, I would say. I think if he has, let's say, pocket fives, I think it's very easy for him to just keep betting the turn, especially if he has a heart or a spade, you know, just keep blasting a turn with a hand like pocket fives.
Mm,
King Jack off, he's just not going to have pre-flop. Jack 9 suited, I don't think he's going to have pre-flop.
yeah.
So it's kind of like King Jack suited is in there, sure. And then I don't know, like a hand like maybe ace jack of diamonds or whatever, where he just, yeah, I'm not sure. Mm.
So it looks like some chips have moved around. I see Dobrich with a big stack now, although he did fold this hand. Duek in the cutoff is first in, and he's raising pocket fives off of 35 or so big blinds into Matthew Sue's button, who's calling with ace jack here.
Yeah, fine play from both players, I think. I think fives is fine to open. Ace jack could probably go either way here. Three bet or call, but mostly call, I would assume.
Yeah, would be interesting to see Duek's response with a hand like this against a 3-bet, but as played, he's going to get to see a pretty good flop. And how would you imagine wanting to play this out of position against the covering stack?
Kind of similar spot as before, right? The difference is that here we're in the cutoff and not the hijack, and I do think Duek would have king 9 off, queen 9 off, jack 9 off, 10 9 off. So he's gonna have a bunch of the offsuit top pairs, which is gonna matter. Um, that being said, I don't think he has pocket trees. I don't think he has, yeah, maybe he has fours. Sue is probably gonna have both of these, so he's gonna have more sets. Duek is gonna have more of the over pairs that Sue is gonna be lacking, like definitely like queens plus. Um, so overall, pretty good flop for Duek, probably. How much c-betting do you want to do here with this risk premium? Good question. Um, he went for like a small bet on the flop, and then he goes for a super small block for value on the river, and he ends up getting paid here, as we can see by Sue. And I think it's kind of nice execution from Duek, actually, just realizing that there's going to be a lot of ace highs getting to the river from Sue here. Sure, he's going to lose to like pocket sixes, sevens, eights, stuff like this sometimes, but um, yeah, kind of a nice hand from Duek, I think. What do you think?
Yeah, I have to agree. I was impressed by finding the value bet. I think while there might not be like perfect technical accuracy to the way that he was playing this hand, it just seemed to be like sized up really well against what most players and Sue included in this category are going to do in response, which is just like not play back with that much aggression, but still call some stuff. And if that's the response you're expecting, this has to just be a good way to play pocket fives post. All right, so let's take a quick look at the solution for this spot. Here you can see the cutoff opening range does include pocket fives, so Duek's open is standard from the cutoff in this situation. And when we look at Sue's range on the button, I'm a bit surprised by this. I'm curious your take, Espen. This looks like a lot of calling.
I mean, I think it's very reasonable. You're covering in position that your opponent is going to have a lot of risk premium, so he's going to have to proceed with caution a lot post flop. I'm not so surprised by this. Looks kind of reasonable to me. It doesn't even look out of line or anything. I could see more hands getting in there as well. Actually a bit surprised that we're not just pure continuing like Jack 10 off, 8
Hmm.
7 suited, 7 6 suited, 6 5 suited, all these. I would think that these would be like kind of nice candidates. Just see a flop here in position. So I don't think it looks too loose actually.
Okay, yeah. I mean, well, clearly you can see ace jack offsuit that Sue did flat here. It's predominantly flatting as well, and it's just a strong enough hand, I suppose, to see a flop. Let's take a look at that post flop spot that we were interested in. All right, so we've loaded this spot into the AI solution, and we don't really want to bet as the cutoff, at least the way that these ranges interact. Even though that button range was so wide and so weak, I mean, 9 high is pretty good for the button's flatting range, and with the risk premium, it looks like we just want to check everything to start.
Yeah, I mean, here, the cutoff is not going to be opening queen 9 off, jack 9 off, 10 9 off, as I alluded to that I think maybe Duek would.
Mm.
Pocket threes is also missing. That was kind of what I felt like. Pocket threes or pocket fours was going to be the cutoff here, and we can see pocket fours is in there, but pocket threes is not. So it's going to be lacking bottom set. It's going to be lacking a lot of the offsuit top pair combos. So add that with the risk premium. I think it makes a lot of sense to not put any money in from the cutoff here.
All right, so if we do force the bet that Duick made on the flop, you can see in position for Sue, kind of what I was suspecting is letting Duick get away with this, is that a hand like Ace Jack, especially with the spade, is allowed to be aggressive on the flop, but chooses to be passive and call. I don't think there's anything wrong with this, but you can see the idea that if we just kind of take the passive option on the flop, and then we get check two on the turn, and again, maybe we have an opportunity to be aggressive and put Duick in a tough spot, but we choose the passive option again. And then on the river, we get that block bet. Once again, maybe we have an option to be aggressive, but we choose the passive option again, right? The more often we see players take these lines, the more I like Duick's play. And you can see that on the river, it's actually just kind of a close spot at equilibrium, even when we expect all that aggression. So from my point of view, it just seems like a hand well played by Duick.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's very well said, and I think Duek. to his I want to give him a shout out because I think this was the first pure no limit hold'em tournament he ever played. He told me he had played like one mixed tournament before that was like half PLO, half no limit hold'em, but he was a PLO player. You know, this was his first pure hold'em tournament, and I think he played really, really good. Like even if he was a hold'em player, I think he played well.
Yeah.
You know, but considering that he's a PLO player, I think he played fantastic this tournament.
Nice. That's cool to hear. All right. Next hand we have here. You're on the button, Espen, with 8-6 suited. And both the blinds are kind of short. 13 blinds for Suki, 20 for Attenborough in the big blinds. How do you see this spot playing out?
I'm going to be a bit biased now because I've already seen the solution. But I remember looking at the spot before I saw the solution. I first of all thought that Attenborough should have a very easy rejam with ace 4 off here versus my open for 20.
Yeah.
It looks like a really good candidate for me. It's just like a hand with good blockers and a hand that doesn't play that well post flop. I also thought that my hand might just be an all-in pre-flop here. I thought it was probably a little bit too weak to jam, so raise seems fine, but I wouldn't be surprised if even jam here. I mean, for sure it makes money, I think. I think people are going to call a bit too tight as well in the blinds here. We can have a quick look at the pre-flop sim after and have a look if we think their ranges are realistic,
Mhm.
but yeah, I wouldn't hate. I definitely want to VPip this one. I also remember the sim just wants to open fold. I think it's right on the border and it just wants to open fold, which is surprising to me. Like especially, I think Suki was playing quite tight, and I think like if the blinds aren't gonna savage you, I think yeah, I think getting away with hands like this is reasonable.
Yeah, I mean, as played, there end up being a ton of decision points in this hand. Attenborough flats pre, check calls a small bet on the flop. Now he leads on the jack, and you call with the flush draw in position, which seems quite like post flop play from your side seems quite standard. But he's taken us down kind of an interesting line. When you river a pair of sixes, we're going to face another lead. I mean, do you see anything about the way that Attenborough played this hand post that really jumps out at you as unusual, or does this seem like what you'd expect from a lot of pros?
Reasonable post flop, I think. First of all, it's kind of an interesting one because you shouldn't have that much ace-x pre-flop. They should all be just rejamming. I should probably just open jam a bunch of ace-x as well. So the ace is kind of like lacking, definitely on his part. So when he check calls the flop, I'm going to be range betting the flop. You know, he's going to be calling quite a lot tighter than range. So I think the jack on the turn is like a really good card for him. Him going for a block there seems reasonable. Him blocking again for value on the river seems reasonable. He has an ace without a kicker. I don't really know though, because if you think about his range on the river, it's like since you don't have that much ace x and a 5x is not good enough to value bet on the river, I'm not really sure how many hands you have on the river that you want to block. Maybe your range just ends up becoming like very polar, and you want to just play a bunch of like huge bets with a jack and bluffs,
Hmm.
and then you just check the side with like 5x or whatever, you know, since you're so lacking in the ace x um, department. What do you think?
Yeah, that's somewhat my impression too. And why don't we have a look to see what the solution thinks? So as you alluded to, Espen, the solution pre-flop thinks 8-6 suited's just a fold, but I suspect the reason you were arguing in favor of continuing this in some way is just, let's look at what the blinds have to do to make that hand a fold. First, we've got Suki playing the small blind, who's supposed to be all in a quarter of the time against your open. Do you think this is realistic?
I do not. I think like a lot of I think all of the suited aces, sure. All of the pairs, sure. I think the weakest offsuit aces like ace deuce through ace six or whatever, ace seven maybe, probably wouldn't get in there. King jack off, yeah, probably. Jack nine suited, maybe, not sure. But I think he would respond a bit tighter than this.
Yeah. And you mentioned open jamming. I mean, you can see there are some hands that want to open jam here, but it's not that common. Would you make the same argument against an open jam? I mean, we're expecting not only Suki in the small blind to call it off with ace four suited and pocket fives and hands like this, but then Attenborough in the big blind to make what looked to me like similarly light calls for 20 bigs, ace five suited, ace nine off.
I don't think this is happening ever, ever, ever. I think the EV, I think the line where they're gonna deviate the most is this one. I
Mm.
don't think he's gonna call ace nine off. I don't think he's gonna call ace seven suited. I don't think he's gonna call pocket fives. I definitely don't think Suki is gonna call like ace seven off and these hands that he was meant to call. I think he's gonna be folding a lot of these. Um, and can we look at my button range again? Can we see 8-6 suited, like what the EV of jam is here versus GTO? Okay, so it's losing quite a bit actually jamming, but it is mixing between raise and fold. Um, yeah.
Yeah, this does
Still,
seem like the relevant question, right? Like you're imagining that we can overcome a reasonable gap here and maybe 9-7 suited or these 9-8 suiteds that are showing up as pure min raises. Maybe these are just fine open jams when the gap is this small, but you think 8-6 suited might be too much?
I would have to node lock it to really know. I'm not sure, but definitely 7-8 suited and 9-8 suited and 7-6 suited as well. I think these hands I would just be very happily all in. I think. Um, yeah, I'm still surprised looking at the sim now that 8-6 suited isn't even a pure open here. Looking at the distribution, I'm kind of just like, yeah, I'm still gonna open it. You know?
Yeah, fair.
Yeah.
Fair enough. When we get to the post flop spot that Attenborough played against you, he checks the flop. You said you were betting one big blind with range. This all seems fine. And as the out of position player, he doesn't really want to do much check raising. Sure, he's got top pair, but there's a bunch of risk premium, right? So we don't want to start stacking off with marginal aces for 20 bigs. So he goes with call, which makes sense. The hand starts to get quite interesting to me on this jack turn because the recommended solution from the AI was to start leading, but to lead big and polarized. And this looks designed for a jack and not much else from my point of view. Do you like this strategy or do you think Attenborough's has some merit?
No, I think this makes a lot of sense. Yeah, as I said, like when you're lacking so much in the ASICs department, I think making a polar size on the turn here makes a lot of sense. The ASICs that you do have is going to be the weaker ones as well, which doesn't really like they don't really benefit much from leading, right? You don't get much protection, and you don't have that much 5x pre-flop. You just fold a lot of 5x pre-flop, I guess. So I don't know. I don't think the small lead makes a lot of sense here. Interesting to note that his ace four offsuit was actually like a pure call pre-flop. He's jamming like ace deuce, ace three, and a lot of ace five and ace six, I think. But ace four was like the one pure call pre-flop, which, yeah, as I said, I would just be pure all in with this one pre-flop. I think, yeah, yeah, it doesn't feel that intuitive for me to flat ace four off here. But yeah, I mean, solvers, yeah, it's gonna be whatever anyways. The EV is gonna be the same, surely.
Yeah. Yeah, I think there's more aces here than most people would have in the big blind, but Attenborough did nail this one. The turn strategy though, we can look down the line that he actually played by editing the size here, but in general, I tend to agree that it doesn't benefit us much to lead with the ace. You can see even when I lock it to a two big blind lead like he used, ace four offsuit, I should show here. It's just kind of indifferent between betting and checking, and checking even has slightly higher EV for most of the combos. I don't see much benefit in leading here. So after his lead, you call in position with the flush draw, which I think is standard. And it actually looks to be kind of thin for him to even keep betting on the river, or do you think there's something else going on? Is there like incentive for us to check to make sure we don't bust, or is this just a good bluff catching spot to check the river?
You mean his ace forehand? I don't know. Like, what are you really hoping to have? Like, you can get calls from every pair between ace and six, or a six or a five, like any pair, and I'm gonna call, of course. You do see that the solver actually uses this size a little bit if you give the option, but um, yeah, I don't know. I don't know. For me, it feels more intuitive to just play all in or check in this spot, or close to all in at least. Leave a big blind maybe, but big bet or check is what feels most intuitive to me in this one.
Yeah, I mean, you can see the solvers mostly using all in with the jacks and all in with some bluffs, and that's what matters in the strategy. But this is a common play that a lot of people use. They try to eke out that last bit of value with a small bet. So I understand why it comes to mind for people. And it looks like from your side, you just didn't really have many decisions here. 8-6 of spades, just a call. Although kind of funny to see the other 8-6s somehow arriving here and sometimes just jamming on the end. I mean, there's a lot of jamming happening here. Did you give any thought to raising, or you just think, I have a pair, it's pretty good, I guess we should just call?
Yeah, my hand just felt too good to go all in with. It didn't feel, yeah. Although it's kind of hard to think, like if you start to think like what bluffs should I pick from here? You, yeah, you have to be a bit creative, I guess. You can see the solver is jamming a bunch of the stuff just like surrounding the jack, probably stuff that blocks his defending range. That includes a jack, like queen nine offsuit, for example, is heavily represented here, right? Hands like that. So I guess that's what we're using, like 10-8 suited, queen nine off, queen 10 off, all these hands that have cards surrounding the jack.
Right. Yeah. This is hard to find for most people, and maybe points to the idea again that if you're playing a line that gets you a little bit of value, similar to the spot with Duek, and your opponents don't respond with enough aggression, then just going for value and being kind of face up works out well. And this might just be a better play by Attenborough than the solver suggests. All right, in this next hand, Suki has ace jack suited from U7, I believe. He goes for the open jam, kind of reminiscent of that Conniff hand with pocket tens. Do you think this spot is pretty much the same?
Pretty much the same, yeah. You have 13.5 bigs or whatever from U7 versus uh, Asher, who had like 15 in low jack, is going to be very similar. Adding a little bit of big blinds, but moving closer to the button. Very similar spot.
And
Uh,
super interesting development when Attenborough is behind with queens, because I mean he has a decision between flatting the 18.9 million and rejamming, right?
yeah. Yeah, we can have a quick look at the preflop sim for this one as well after, but I do remember thinking that I wouldn't play a jamming range as Attenborough here with that many people left to act. It kind of feels, it doesn't feel that intuitive for me to just want to pile the rest of the money in when you can call. And then, like, if you get two all ins behind you or something crazy happens, you can get away, you know? Um,
Yeah,
but
that's
yeah,
that's my instinct as well. Like I often default to just only calling in these spots. I
yep.
mean, maybe that's just simple for me to keep track of. I know that I could find some folds, and being able to find some folds later can be quite valuable. So that just would have been front of mind for me.
Yeah, it just doesn't feel like there's a lot of downside to it most often, right? It just feels like there's some upside. It's small, but there's no downside really, for the most part. Um, but yeah, I probably again wouldn't play jams in Suki's shoes here. I would just play min raise. When you're this early position with risk premium, jamming 13.5 doesn't seem that intuitive. Maybe it's going to be the same as the previous one where you have like a super small jamming range with like king jack suited and ace queen off and pocket nines or whatever. But it's going to be a very small one, if anything, I think.
Well, let's have a look. So here's the spot for Suki in the solver, and there are a couple of jams. The typical candidates, I suppose, as you called them last time, Espen. But ace jack suited, I don't know. We're not far off, right? It's close between a min raise and an open jam.
Yeah, clear preference to min raise. I mean, it's close. It's like 0.02 EV difference. So it's not, yeah, you're not torching money, but a clear preference, I would say, for the solver.
Yeah,
Um,
fair enough. And let's look at that spot that Attenborough had, because this surprised me when I first looked at it. I mean, he nails the combo again, but yeah, jokes aside, do you see some importance here in being able to find these jams, or do you think it would have been totally fine to just call your whole range?
I mean, if you look at the EV difference here, it's the same EV difference as Suki's mistake, so to say.
Yeah.
So, I mean, yeah, I mean, it looks like it matters, but it's kind of hard for me to explain why it's better. I would have to click through all the ranges and see responses and stuff to figure that out. But um, I'm gonna assume that the main benefit is that we can get some pairs to fold by shoving ace king, and we don't only want to shove ace king, so we need queens in there to protect the high card shoves. I'm not sure. Something like this is going on, I guess, but um, yeah, I I still think the strategy wouldn't lose much if you just want to play call here and no jam.
Mhm. Yeah, I would be tempted to do the same, and, we didn't bring it up in detail, but Dobrich did have pocket tens in the next seat behind and found a good fold, maybe a clear one for anyone who's spent some time in these solutions. But just to point out the fact that when you do jam, you're not jamming to get value, right? So that's why it is a little unclear what the benefits are, but just the math works out for this particular hand. I would probably continue to simplify myself and keep just range calling. Ace queen offsuit for you on the button. You're 50 big blinds deep, but it looks like the blinds are short. We've got Suki with 12 and Attenborough with 6. Do you like your choice here?
I've also looked at the sim, so I know that it is incorrect. I'm supposed to min raise,
Mhm.
but it's the EV is the same pretty much. So it's kind of whatever. I do remember thinking in game here that if the stacks were reversed of the blinds, so if the big blind had 12 and the small blind had 6, I would be more incentivized to min raise. When the big blind is this short, he's gonna get to defend a lot of hands versus the min raise. So in general, you benefit a bit more from jamming into the blinds if the big blind is the short one instead of the small blind. So yeah, I think the solver preferred min raise with this one, but EV difference was not there. So I'm fine with it. Whatever. Um, I asked him on the turn. I asked him on the flop, "Do you feel good about your hand?" Or he said like, "I feel good about." No, he said, "I feel good about my hand pre-flop." And then on the turn, I asked him, "Do you still feel good about your hand?" And yes.
It's amazing to think that Attenborough was down to 6 bigs here and all in at risk, because I mean anyone who's seen this tournament knows he comes back in glorious fashion, but this
Tournament
yeah,
poker. It's a crazy game.
he was more than halfway out the door there.
Yep.
Pass on the ace-5 from under the gun would certainly be light. But now we've got Attenborough. Maybe shortly later, he's at 32 million now, 2 million big blind, 16 bigs, pocket eights, low jack. This is a familiar story.
Pocket nines. Pocket nines in the low jack. Oh no, he's under gun 7. He's under the gun 7 with 16.
Oh yeah, you're right.
This is definitely not a spot you want to play jams. The two previous ones felt like super close, like 15 in low jack or 13 and a half under gun 7, but this is 16 under gun 7. This is definitely, yeah, not a spot you want to incorporate in all-in range at all. I do think if you want to play all-ins here, it is definitely the hand to do it with. I just don't think your range really benefits from playing all-ins here.
Yeah. Yeah, and these are just, we've talked about it at length now, but you don't need to commit your stack when there's so many players behind. It feels like so impossibly unlikely that someone has queens and someone else has ace king or whatever, but the earlier position you are, the more likely it is that those scenarios are going to play out. And it's just an
Yep.
unnecessary risk to put in this much from an early position, right? This is totally fine play from well, it's probably too strong of a hand to do this from the button, but the idea of jamming 16 bigs on the button is so different from the idea of jamming 16 bigs from U7.
Yeah. Again, he
Yeah,
fools
I
this.
talked about him being halfway out the door. This was an even worse spot.
Sure. And it's one of those as well, like you have two, I think, recreational players in the blinds that don't have that much chips. I think the
Mhm.
incentive to jam then is even lower, right? If you have like Linus in the big blind with like 200 big blinds or something like that, where like you're gonna face
Yeah.
like infinite post-flop aggression, and you're gonna just be put in the bin so much. Okay, I mean, I get it. You don't wanna be in that spot, but, here, I kinda happy just playing in position, versus, people that you maybe perceive to have a post-flop edge against. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a really good point. So, as you alluded to, Espen, just no need for a range to have open jams here. And actually, I think it's easy to underestimate how big a mistake this one was. Pocket nines, according to this solution, is losing more by jamming than it would by folding. So this is just it's not even, oh, min raise is the better option. This is just a losing play.
Yeah, this is a disastrous one, I think, compared to the other ones where the EV wasn't that different. It's just like, yeah, you just prefer to play min raise. Here, it's actually losing you money to shove, which is, yeah, just shows like how, yeah, how you have to really keep in mind like early position with risk premium. You don't play much shoves once you get above like 13 bigs or whatever.
Well, we've got Sue in the midst of a pretty rough spell. He came in one of the chip leaders, right? And now has pocket jacks raising from under the gun, 24 big blinds effective.
Yeah, me and Sue had shared chip lead coming into the final table. We had exactly this same stack somehow. We were at separate tables when we were 2 tables left. And when they combined it to the unofficial final table, 10 left, me and him had exactly the same stack, which is kind of incredible.
Yeah. What is Duczak doing here?
He's taking a shot of some, I don't remember exactly what type of alcohol it is, but you can see his face is not water. It's not water, it's not coffee, it's not Pepsi Max. It's I
And
think it was
goes
vodka maybe. I think
shoots it and then
Oh.
goes all in for 18 big blinds in the low jack. I mean, ace king off. You can't blame him for just putting it in, but I mean, do we think
Yeah.
this is the standard play?
No, it's kind of a similar story as to shoving a lot of big blinds, just open shoving from early position. Here you're three bet shoving, uh, so it's a bit different, but it's still under the gun has opened and you're in the low jack. So it's like early position versus early position, low jack versus U9. Very tight ranges. When that's the case, usually you don't play that much jamming. There are some spots in ICM like this where you do play jams with ace king and ace king only. It's literally the only hand you will jam in some of these solutions. Um, I don't know if that's the case with this one. We can have a quick look after, but I would personally not play any jams here. You can see the pain in Sue's face here. It's painful to watch as well. Like honestly, he was such a nice guy, and I think he played well. Um, just losing that pocket queens to pocket nines right before this. And now is all in with jacks versus ace king and gets this board. I don't know. He just had a lot of rough spots on his final table, I think. Yeah, rough day when you come into the final table, shared chip lead. Your stack is worth, I don't know how many $1 million, but yeah, quite quite a few. And then you just keep getting coolered over and over again in unavoidable spots. Yeah, that's how it is sometimes, but yeah.
Yeah, so as you suggested, Espen, the strategy for Duszek in the low jack is pretty much only small three bet. I mean, the sizes here offered either four big blinds or all in. We don't know if something in between would have been preferred, but ace king offsuit is actually higher EV to flat here than it is to jam. This just makes me think even further that, risking this much from this early of a position is quite difficult. We haven't talked about the bubble factors specifically yet, but I just want to pull them up quickly because right now the stacks are fairly condensed. There's a 24, a 14, an 18, a 17, a 13, right? Like these bust outs are really key. So there's a lot of risk premium for the low jack against this under the gun opener, right? Looks like almost 10%.
Yeah, I mean, we have 10% risk premium here, but other than that, we also have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 people left to act. It's quite a lot with 5
Yeah.
people left to act and a risk premium versus a very tight range. the combination of all these things. It's often like this in poker. It's not one thing that decides how the strategy is formed. It's a combination of things, and it's the same here. Risk premium, early positions, tight ranges. Yeah, just all combined means that we don't want to play any 3-bet jams, even though it's only for 18 big blinds here.
Makes sense.